and just working in various different backgrounds on accessibility. And so it was really nice to kind of have those initial chats. And I thought I got to do that because Gareth introduced me. And I thought, how many other people are starting their accessibility journey or in a network where they don't have somebody else to go, speak to these 5 people or join this on Twitter, or there's a group that you want to go to. And so I felt like I was in a privileged position in that sense. And I wanted to create that kind of thing for people that feel like they are the lone evangelist in their organization. And so that was another reason that I wanted to join people together. But when I was having these conversations, I was almost feeling like I was answering very similar questions, and everybody had really similar issues or wanted to talk about resources and loads of different kind of angles. And I thought, I'm not the only person that is having these issues or want to have these discussions. Other people are having the same as me. And if we can link together and all have those chats together, surely that would give people that boost that they're not on their own. You know, there are other people that are doing these things, and there's a way of creating a community of people that in your own organization that makes real change. And so it started like that, and then it's just kind of gotten bigger and bigger. I would say, Gareth, like it's just
it is a very nice problem. It's a very, very nice problem to have. That it's a very big problem, but it's getting
yeah. But it's great, and so the conversations that I've had with people, you know, everybody's at those various different stages of their accessibility journey, and I think linking up with people that are in those stages and can see the future is great. You know, I've had some chats to people and they've gone, I've mentioned it to senior leadership, I'm the only one that's interested at the minute, like how do I chat to more people, how do I get people interested? I don't have any resources, or even they just want to ask that question but they don't have that knowledge behind them either. So I think when you start to have those conversations with people, it makes it really nice that the community almost develops naturally. Oh, Andy, you put your hand up.
I was just going to jump in a couple of things. I just want to do a bit of housekeeping. I've mentioned it in the chat, but anybody who hasn't quite seen that yet or caught up with that or has it muted, if you are in the middle of a network, if you're a network leader or some sort of person with, leading an accessibility network, I'm interested to know which organization you're in and how many people are in it. It'd be great to get a tally of that by the end of this session. And then the other point was just to say, please stay on mute and raise your hand if you want to speak. We'll try and keep track of hand raising within the participants list. So I think we'll sort of start with a small group having a chat, but we do want to hear from others. So just wanted to make that point as well. So yes, Andy, you talked about piggybacking.
Let's, I mean, it's just interesting because some people on this call, I have a very bad informal network via Twitter, and that's the way I started gathering allies from outside the organisation, and that's been really powerful. I've joined several people that I haven't followed bizarrely till involved with TechShare Pro. I think that's quite interesting. But what I did want to pick up on the comment from Jodie actually about Jodie Greer in the chat. She talked about level of champions, and that's something we're really looking at the moment, quite interestingly. So we're a big we use Microsoft for our 9,500 staff across 13 sites, and we've just started trying to push the accessibility fundamental stuff, which is available on MS Learn. I think Michael will come on at some point, I think, about that. We thought about the idea of using some of those things and some of those involved and trying to build up our own sort of like a badging system, I suppose, really, without making it sound that posh, really. But the idea of trying to do inclusive meetings, or the idea of using certain tools or that kind of stuff. And we have thought about tiers, really, and we have had a bit of a discussion around people that are So within our super user champions network we have, which is primarily around Office 365 products, we have people that are experts in certain things. So I've got a couple of my two of my colleagues who are fully registered blind, who are massive experts in using Teams if you're visually impaired. And you know, they're just, why would they bother talking to me? Because they can talk to somebody who's got a lived experience and has to use the tool every day. So I think that's a really interesting one about level about levels of teams and expertise. But I think there's a really bigger question about is how you don't put people off by appearing with when they're an expert when they first arrive. Because you've come into a conversation between Gareth and Charlie, I feel like an amateur, really. and I think you just want to how we include people and start people on the journey, and thinking you don't have to be an expert to be an ally. You may never be an expert if you want to be involved in accessibility. You just might be an expert in getting people to talk to each other, and just, I think that's a really interesting one about how networks should be inclusive, and also that idea of an informal network. I think that's quite an interesting one. I'm not a big, I've only just really discovered LinkedIn during lockdown. I was a bit bored, so I had a look, if I'm really honest. Some people use LinkedIn for informal networks. Some other people use other tools. So I'll throw that out and shut up.
Yeah, that's helpful, Andy. I just, if I can just come back to you, Charlie. I think I'll tend to come back to you because I think, the focus for what we do next is we're trying to create a network that somehow you're going to facilitate or enable or help us do that. I mean, I'm genuinely not saying we're all looking to you to do that, but I do think it's helpful to have a focus. Because I just want to check in now. It is a question that came up. Do you have a picture of what we think the person at the center of the network might be doing? We've used some phrases. I've got some suggestions, like an evangelist, a champion, an ally, the coordinator, the leader. I mean, just, have you got a picture of, I know you've got sort of 120 responses, so I'm sure they're hugely different, but have you got a picture of the sort of network, the sort of person who's asking you for help? Or at least a couple of examples that we can understand where.
I would say that there's such a variety of people that have joined that, some people have got networks that are reasonably well established, and that, they're just looking for some different resources or different ways of viewing things. And we've got some people that are literally just starting something or have wanted to start something and have been enthusiastic and kind of go, I want to be around the rest of these groups of people because I want to share stories, I want to get some ideas. I think that the variety of it is massive. Like, what would you say, Gareth, as well? Like, from what we already have.
It's huge, but again, this is all down to different organisations have approached this slightly differently. I mean, even what Andy was talking about then about and someone was asking about levels of champion. We haven't got that, because it's not about people being experts. It's for us. We already have experts in the business, and we do train, and we generally try and encourage expertise across the business. But the champions are simply, they make sure it's discussed at every sprint. They're the voice of the user, the voice of the subject. That's what we want going on internally. We want the discussion to happen. And that doesn't mean that anyone has to be an expert. You can be just interested and just passionate about it. You can become a champion immediately. Then we will support you in your personal development as best we can, whichever way you want to go, whatever role you're in. Whether you don't have to be a developer, you don't have to be a designer, you can be a business analyst, QA tester, product manager. Everyone has a part to play. And I think this is one of those things that's just the BBC way. That's ours, which is quite this cultural route. We're finding other people have got really structured routes, and they're saying, no, it's about a path of expertise, and it's a path of knowledge. And we're finding other bits and pieces. There's hybrids coming through from all sorts of different places. And I think we're going to find with many models around this equally as valid, because organizations are different. We're not going to try and create a structure and say this is what a champions network is, but there's going to be this, there's going to be crossovers between all of us. But the one thing we know is we all have the same outcome. The thing is, we all know is the same outcome.
So Gareth,
and that's
so okay, let's come to that point then, because you're making quite a huge assumption at that point. What do you think the outcome is that binds us all together? How would you describe it? What's the rallying cry? Because we're all in different jobs, we're all in different organizations, we all have different ways of doing it, skills. But you think there's something that glues us together. Do you have a sense of what that might be?
We all have an audience. At the end of the day, we all produce things that people use, and we want everyone to be able to use them. And it's around that. It's just simply enabling our organization to have the broadest reach and to be completely inclusive in that reach. Now we're going to have all sorts of different products and services right the way through across that. So we're going to find different paths and different things we need. We've got games companies, banks, we've got government agencies, got all sorts of people coming. There's a very big advertising agency that's contacted and said, we want our stuff to be accessible. We now have an accessibility lead who is quite a senior designer, and it's so how do we make this work? And that's that whole point is, you know, we're not expecting to have a load of answers. We're going to have a load of perspectives that come in, and it's going to be, we want to foster discussion and conversation. And that's where the new things will be. It's a talking shop, a place for ideas.
So can I check in on something? I think that's great. I'm trying to find the strap line for the network I want to join. I want to make the thing I do available and accessible to everybody. Something like that.
Yes.
Is it a digital? Is there a digital bit in this? Does it need to be somehow constrained to say it's about how we as this network enable our digital stuff to be accessible, or do you want to have? I wonder, you know, to what extent you want it to be all things to everybody, you know, as in literally all accessibility, or and coming back to the people at the center of the network, you know, what do we want from one another? Is it necessarily helpful to constrain it to digital? I'd be interested in any comments within the chat as well, because I think we, you know, the little bit of defining your terms and getting clear about where our common ground is, and equally not, I'm a little bit mission creep if we're not careful. You know.
Oh gosh, yeah. But I mean, it's already
until we're talking about inclusion of all types of thing, and it doesn't have a focus where I can come in and check in on your update on WCAG 3.0 because you've never heard of it.
Oh.
No, who knows? You know,
I mean, I would, in some ways, you know, there are other places to go and discuss WCAG. You know, we want to talk about things that are, you know, organizational and cultural and strategic and tactical. You know, WCAG's just a tool, and that's great. It's a very good tool. It's not the only thing that you need to use. It's part of a suite of things. You know, it's there are people that will want to come along and talk about compliance, and that will be it.
Oh,
you've muted Gareth.
Mute himself. I think he's run out of minutes. Michael, I'm going to come to you.
I managed to sit on my mute button.
No, you've run out of talking minutes. You had quite a lot this morning. So, Michael, I want to just check in with you, just simply because I know that a lot of the work that goes on in Microsoft actually emerged out of the ERG, the work with the employee representation groups, and I just wondered about this question about digital. Do you think that there is a narrowness to that? Is that too restrictive, or on the other hand, does it at least give it a focus, and maybe it also reflects where we're going next rather than where we are now?
So the summary of this, I would think it's too narrow. I mean, it's always a bit tricky when you start something as a movement or as an employee resource group, where you kind of think like, you know, there's a strategy that we want to deploy, where ultimately the outcome is that, you know, everything is mainstream, accessibility, disability inclusion is mainstream, but you know that there's a huge journey while the bumps are on the road. And on that sense, for example, the things that it's then great that you get champions, that you get people who are enthusiastic about features and that kind of stuff. But one of the dangers that you then see is, and I'm going to give an example, and I know that it can sound just a little bit harsh, but you then get really enthusiastic people and passionate people, and they go like, oh, we saw this lady, and she had a tremor in her hands, and we wanted to discuss with her about dictate and the products, and how do we best do that? And I was like, whoa. It's like, was she asking for help? And well, no, not exactly, but. And I said, well, you know, and that's where I think definitely there's an element of awareness to be had. There's an element of empathy to be had. It's great to have those champions, but there's an element on what makes us human to be there as well, and not just a digital focus. Otherwise, you tend to go away with, oh, everything, it's all technology. No, there's a lot to it. There's a huge amount to it. There's even understanding why certain solutions work and why some don't. I think there's that whole ecosystem that you need to understand. And if you go too far in technology, you could end up saying, why are we doing this again? And that's then where you can get into the area where, oh, we need a business case for this, because now you're asking for a lot. So you really need to understand where you're coming from. So I think it needs to have that whole holistic picture. But yeah, by all means, we'll take every champion, but we want the champion to know what she or he is fighting for.
Mm.
And so back, Charlie, just I think what's starting to emerge here, a little bit of mapping, I guess, isn't it? It's thinking about something about where people sit in the organization, something about the nature of their role. I mean, you're a change manager. I think that was your job title. Is that right? So, you know, it sounds very different to somebody who's the chief of accessibility, for example, or Michael.
Exactly.
Michael, I can't remember your title. It hasn't got accessibility in your job title, is it? From what I can remember. But this all very
so I mean, there's a good point here. So,
isn't it?
go
Sorry. I'm just thinking that maybe that mapping is what we need next, in the sense of thinking about, on the one hand, where do people see themselves in the organization? Something about the nature of their role in relation to product and service development. I mean, there are going to be plenty of other roles that could be relevant. HR is an obvious example. Something about the existing nature of the networks that are there, whether they're labeled in any particular way, whether they're Heather from Skyscanner, we've been doing some work with her. They had a guild, and that's a word I've heard, which may be the same as a network. You know, could well be essentially the same type of slightly formal, informal network. So, you know, a little bit of language gathering, a little bit of mapping, a little bit of documenting. And I will add, be interested in the numbers. If you haven't seen that message in the chat, if you in an organization that you would consider has a network, I'd love to know how many we're talking about, because I think that could be a huge number of people that we're trying to engage with through this network of networks. So in the chat, if you haven't done it already, if you can tell me the name of your organization, but certainly the number of people that you consider to be in that network around you that you'd be interested in engaging with, that would be helpful. But Charlie, some mapping, some serious task for you. I don't quite know where to start on it, but that's what we're missing at the moment, isn't it?
I think that's kind of the next stage. I almost wanted to reach out and go, as much as I want to facilitate this and run it to a certain extent, I also want other people to kind of go, oh, this is my skill. This is how I see a network would be run. This is how my networks run internally, and it works really well for us. You know, I almost want it to be a natural progression of what this looks like, but I think everyone's going to bring really different skills. I don't have that technical accessibility knowledge, and so I would need that from somebody else. And some, you know, there's going to be lots of different skills that people will bring to this network, which I think is going to be really interesting. And when you talked about guilds before, you know, that's something that's developed slowly in the network that we've got at the BBC. So these guilds have formed, and they're very specific. So they talk more about their everyday problems and their workarounds, and really kind of in-depth, detailed things. And I think that's what happened in this group. I think we'll end up speaking together and then maybe banding off into smaller groups around broadcasting or government or financial, and people having a very similar interaction or way of working in that group as well. So I think that is what I see in the future. But if that's how this network develops, then that's great. But I'm almost really open to people going, actually, I think that this could work well in this area, or this is a better way of working. I think if we all develop it, we're all going to get something out of it.
Cool. So
yeah,
I will start sort of see if I can pick out some comments here. There's a couple of things in here. One is about a theory of change. Somebody's saying, I sort of, to break into that, what are we going to do next? Do we need a theory of change? I don't know what that means to you, Charlie, whether that's something you could comment on. It's not something I understand a great deal about, to be honest. So does that mean we're trying to make something happen and we've got to work out what it is we've got in common, which is back to that point that Gareth was saying about common ground. I think that is one of the initial challenges, isn't it, to create a sense of identity.
I think it's find out what we all want from it. You know, that was one of my key questions that I want to ask people when I have this discussion, is like, what do you want to get out of this network? Like, what is it that you're looking for? And is that something that we can make part of the network? And that's the thing that I think is important. If they go, I really want this network just as a place to get external ideas from people, then wonderful. If it's somewhere it's like, I don't know how to change the culture in my environment, and how can we discuss that as a group, then great. I think that that change, that culture change, is what I want from the group in general. I think when me and Gareth first started talking about it, I thought if every organisation that joined this group, their accessibility standards or level or knowledge went up a little bit, and their whatever it is, their product changed in what, I think all of us interacting with each other, we will interact with each person in a different way. But let's say it's a platform that we use that we've always found difficulty in their certain accessibility issues, and we've had to work around that for us. If we can build that together and get around it, then that works really well.
Mm. So
I think Mark, there's an important distinction here as well to draw, because this is more about creating a space where people can go and talk, and they're just network managers. You know, this is it. It's organizations who have a very similar thing. If we have we have multiple types of network. We have a staff disability network, we have a disability champions network, we have an accessibility champions network, we have accessibility guilds, all happening within the BBC, and they have different functions and they overlap, and people are members of all sorts of different things, and some of them are about staff representation, and some of them are about, you know, sort of skills development, and some of them literally is just creating a space for conversation. And so I think there's that kind of, is not, we're not going in there to kind of say, you know, overpromise that this is going to be, you know, a fountain of all knowledge and a place where we're going to spread how to do this. It literally is about connecting people up who have a very similar challenge, and that's, they have a network. It's at that level of abstraction. This is pure divergence at the minute. We're not, you know, we're reaching out. It's at that part, the double diamond, we're right at the beginning, and we are completely divergent at the whole thing, and gathering as much as we can before we try and start converging on stuff. And it has to be a democracy. You know, this is not the BBC's network. You know, it has to become something that will then start deciding who runs it itself, and deciding who, you know, and building a democracy into it is the one thing that we've kind of, Charlie, almost like decided it has to work.
Yeah.
Otherwise it becomes, you know, it becomes skewed, and we don't want that.
Cool. So I've got some hands up. I'm going to assume that Michael and Andy may have had them there before, because I'd quite like to hear another voice. Rebecca, can see you in there. Don't know whether you could unmute and ask a question or have something to say. You've got your hand up, Rebecca Nancaro.
Where are you, Beck?
Where are you, Beck? Are you out there?
She just...
She hasn't lowered her hand, has she? No, she. Are you? I'm not sure whether he's trying to speak. The other person who's got their hand up is Richard Phillips Kerr.
That was a complete accident. My apologies.
So Richard will be running sessions later in how to raise your hand in a team.
I think now you've got the stage, go for it.
Yes, please do. It'd be good to hear some other voices in the session. Another thing I've just picked up from the chat. I guess it's a question of what we're looking for. It just struck me, there's a little bit here about signposting. You know, where can I find what's happening with a little bit of moral support. There's a lot of people who might feel like they're the only person, they haven't got a network yet because no one's listening. And then there's a little bit more than that. There's stuff that I think with the BBC as an example, where there are multiple connections to be made potentially to other networks. So there is a sort of a layer to that, isn't there? I you know, welcome anybody in the group. Nivi.
Hello, I've finally found the omnivore. I don't even know what it's called. It's Rebecca Nancaro here. Okay. Hello, I'm from the BBC. I work with Gareth and Charlie, and I'm interested listening to all of this conversation. One of the things I think we made a mistake with at the beginning was not capturing all the information that we found out. And part of that change theory that you're talking about, once you've got that enthusiasm and you've explained why it's important to people, and everyone ignites and starts talking, it's a very organic thing when champions start to get excited. And from that culture, we learned a great deal. But what we didn't do well was capture stuff. So, for example, Ian Hamilton, when he left, we hadn't grasped all the information that he understood. So I think when you're bringing, and I'm sorry, I've got cats growling behind me as well. It's all kicking off it. It's worthwhile once you've got these groups, and these dynamic groups of champions do come together. They'll come together on issues that they have. Everyone's trying to understand. They'll find each other. And they'll solve their own questions. And I'm very keen for us to be, my thing is training as well. I'm very, part of the thing we do with the champions is when they start bringing their groups together and they ask us questions about a certain thing, training now is this organic thing that they then impart that information to other people who are interested to listen. So when you're talking about experts, those experts are growing in the fields that they come across because it's relevant to the job they're doing. It's difficult to, like, we're putting training online at the moment, but that's only the basics. The true champion network will start to bring that knowledge together, share that knowledge, train with that knowledge, then we can document that knowledge and keep that knowledge. I would hope as part of this network that I believe I'm going to be helping Charlie with. I can hear I'm putting my hand up. Charlie, you're all right. It's one of those things would very much be bringing that knowledge together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Accepting that it changes because, you know, technology changes, but it is the champions that hold that knowledge, and it's really important to capture it.
Thank you very much, Becca. And I think that clearly, Charlie, that's going to be something that we all want to do in some ways. It set some benchmarks and gather data. I'm going to invite attendee 862 to speak. I'm afraid I don't know your name, but
I've been dying to know who they are.
Attendee 862, you have your hand up, I think. So you're very welcome to join us.
Am I now? Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yeah.
Hiya.
I'm John Beaton from Inclusion Scotland. I'm the Highland Policy and Engagement Officer, and we did a project and we're a disabled persons organisation, so the majority of the board are disabled people, staff and volunteers. And we were asked by Scottish Government to see how we could increase civic participation of disabled people. Now, that sounds a bit abstract and off kilter to what you're talking about, but the research that I did, the unstructured sort of research at the start, said there was two things you needed: collective advocacy and digital accessibility. So we've been forming, initially we formed a steering group. The steering group then decided to form a community of practice, and what we did was research with disabled people about what they needed. And to reflect on Gareth's remark about having different responses for different parts, that was very clear that, you know, there was a systems-based approach that you needed to take. And although people might not have thought they were thinking in those ways, when we did the emancipatory research with disabled people in Highland, that's what they were doing. So there was an intervention that was needed with the individuals as disabled people. There was a neighbourhood intervention, there was a community intervention, there was an organisational intervention, and there was a public intervention. And I think that, you know, in terms of enabling change, for disabled people's organisations, we're very good at acknowledging and motivating around lessening self-stigma, the felt resources that you get from peer support, the sharing of values, and those values being around open honesty and transparency, and that sort of bonding social capital that creates that peer support. The thing that's difficult for disabled people's organisations to change is obviously what happens in the public and private sector. But what I'm hearing from this conference today is that people are willing to be part of the shaping of this, and creating the opportunities, removing the structural stigma, creating the practical resources with the technological tools, sharing their networks like they are at this conference. And that's very much about that linking social capital. But the missing link we found was the influencing part. And that was how we sort of lifted the social stigma, gave people a better understanding what disability was, created a learning resource, had shared norms, and had that sort of bridging social capital. So we bridged disabled people into the sort of the acknowledging that there was a problem at one end, trying to shape it at the other, but the influencing part came out of forming a community of practice. And that community of practice then identified the solutions they needed at each level. So they said, we need digital disability natives. So it's someone's got an identity from a community who self-identifies as a disabled person, but is also a digital native that can change me from a digital migrant and take me into that sphere as well. They identified they needed disabled people's organisations, so we're trying to build the first digital DPO that I'm aware of, which isn't going to be entirely digital. So it's a digital disabled persons organisation fit for the 21st century called High Ability Voices Inclusion. But everything that grew out of that, once we got the theory of change done, and then identifying what the things were, was that guilds type community of practice, people with a shared passion or interest who came together regularly in order to do that thing better, and that was civic inclusion in our case. And I think that model is very powerful for what you're talking about. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that I have never been so buzzed or excited or amazed at what's going on out there. And I work with a lot of people in Scotland, and I'm trying to have these conversations with them. And, you know, I'm trying to bring people ahead of the curve. This conference has left the curve somewhere that I can't even see the curve in the road. All I can see is this straight line towards change. And I've never been so pumped. We're at an opportunity here that we can either put the disability movement back 10 years for COVID, but forward 20. And I think we can move it forward 20. But it's about doing the right thing at the right time. And here I am amongst all these wonderful people doing the right thing at the right time. I've never felt so privileged in my life. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us, and that's a fantastic way of you, as you said, sort of bridging the bridging piece. I'm going to keep bringing some other voices in, but I think it does strike me that's also you've articulated the common cause there very nicely as well, James, about what we're trying to achieve. So, Nivi, you're next in my list. If you're able to, you have your hand up at the moment, unless that was an accident. You're welcome to speak.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nivi. I work as an IT developer in higher education, and accessibility was within the job description, but not necessarily in the job title. But because I'm partially sighted, my peripheral vision doesn't work, and I use some magnification. I'm kind of like the accessibility nagger in a way at work because I live with it. So I've had some sort of like, I've been able to influence some of the things that we do at work in terms of making them more accessible. And obviously with all the public accessibility regulations at a larger level, there's more support for things being made accessible. So obviously being loud enough to be asked to carry out the accessibility testing within the department, and also the sort of like from the central, a few people were pinpointed as possible attendees to this conference, so I've been able to join. So there is support, and I think one of the ways where I've sort of like got people adopting better practices is because I go, well, it's not necessarily you should do it. It's actually, you cannot read things if you're in bad lighting. You might not be able to listen to videos if you're on the, if you're in public transport. So subtitles can be beneficial for more than just the people that cannot hear. There might be people that cannot see in certain circumstances. So that, I'd be very interested in learning how to advocate in a way that doesn't look like, oh, this is a boring thing of accessibility, you should do it. But look, if you think about different situations when you design a product, you might be more likely to benefit everyone.
I think that's fantastic as an example of what we're looking for, really, as a starting point for you saying, I'm looking for this, and that change up to being listened to as well. That's also part of it, isn't it? So that, I mean, I do just want to add, I think that the program that we pulled together this year had that extra layer at the beginning around the business leaders saying that they're listening. That's obviously a small number of people saying that. We can all tell everybody we know that they said that now. But I think also the switch to virtual has just changed it completely. It was quite cozy last year. It was great fun. But it's very different to this. And I think as AbilityNet, I have to say, we hadn't quite clocked the power of what we could do with this event. We were still a little bit working like the previous version. We were going to get together and have a nice time and see lots of people that we know. And I think this is this meeting and this session is the one that's really drawing out and reaching out, showing the different pockets of connections that we need to make. So I think that the mapping of that will be cool, and the questions about things we're trying to get will be great. Thank you, Nivi. Robert Precious, you've had your hand up. Be interested to hear what you've got to say.
Hiya. I just wanted to back up the moral support argument for the network. So I'm now on my second attempt at a champion network, and it seems to be sticking this time. But before I went to there was an Accessibility Manchester talk with Gareth and co, and talking about champion networks, and we hear a lot of experience of networks that didn't quite work out the first time. That support that gave me was like, yeah, it's going to take some time. I just need to keep investing, make these changes, and having that support and having that group of people to talk about that with is invaluable.
Oh, Mark, you've muted yourself now.
Pause while I was answering a question in the studio. Sorry, Rob.
It's not just me.
You need to answer this question. It's about what we're doing next. Sorry.
Well, Robert, it's know that it's not just mine that failed first time round. This is they constant. I think one thing about networks is they have to constantly reinvent themselves because organizations change. Also, you're learning. The first we've gone through a few reboots, and we're going through one again now. The network is arguably 15 years old, but in name it's 8, and it's gone through many reboots in that time, and it needs to change, and we learn and we go, okay, let's get everyone back together again and restructure. But originally all we were was a gang of people writing the BBC's guidelines, and that was it.
There's a couple of people who've had hands up. We're going to run out of time. That's one of the things I was being told. Rebecca Potter, I'm interested to see what your contribution is.
Am I?
Oh.
You're unmuted. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, hi. And the video works too. Isn't technology brilliant? So I am not at the same level of awareness, maturity as a lot of people. I work for a company called GP Strategies, and we're kind of a performance improvement company. So we work with clients and work on training projects when they've got a particular problem to solve, or a system or a product that's changing or launching. And I suppose, I've been involved in that design stage for the training right at the beginning, taking the project right the way through to the end. And, my idea has always been to support people to be able to do their jobs when this business change comes in. But I've kind of always assumed, and wrongly, that, somebody's going to take care of accessibility, or what we're producing is accessible. Somebody somewhere will do it, and it's okay because they'll take care of it. But I've quickly realised that people are asking questions, and that's just not the case. And I'm shocked, to find that some of the tools that we use don't produce accessible content. And I was listening to the talks. I think it was the first day around accessible formats. There's the 3 things that really resonated with me is you've got to have the awareness that some people might have an issue, or that there are blockers to people accessing what you're producing. But if you want to do something about it, you've got to have the skills and the tools to do that as well. And I think myself and certainly my colleagues are at that first awareness phase. And it's really important for me to connect with other people who are maybe a bit further down the line, so that, you know, there's kind of a reassurance that, yeah, we can do it, we can make progress. But also I need to kind of gather the resources together to give people that I work with the skills and the tools to make the change. Because, you know, there's not much point just sitting around being angry about things. You've got to do something about it as well.
Thank you. Well, and I think that idea of the maturity model is interesting. I noticed somebody just mentioned the BDF one in there. AbilityNet has a digital accessibility maturity model that we're just about to release. We've been working on, and there are others. There are plenty out there, maturity models. I think the maturity model idea is trying to understand where you are in your own development is really the point of that. I mean, it's a consultancy tool, or a management tool, and then I think there could be one around accessibility networks. You know, there could be something around looking at the models for networks, looking at some of the changes that you need to make without defining exactly what you've got to do at every stage. What we learned when we were building our maturity model is there's much more about outcomes than it is about inputs. You know, what are you actually achieving now? What can you see and measure that's different to what you were doing before? So, and I think that would be really interesting to see whether some of your mapping could potentially lead to some sketching out of some of that framework. I know David Williams has got his hand up. David, good to hear what you've got to say. I can see you unmuting yourself. Hi, David.
Afternoon, Mark. Can you see me?
I can indeed. How are you doing?
I'm doing not too bad.
I haven't spoken to you yet since it started. I don't think so.
We've had a couple of emails. It's quite ironic. I didn't actually check the agenda too much, but this is a great session.
Great. Thank you.
In the keynote from Ulrika, she mentioned about the need to collaborate.
Yeah.
And I think obviously this is my second TechShare. Last year was quite different to this year of the skills I've had to use to get it running, get the team to prepare everything. But for me, if I look at last year, there was a missing part. And at the end of the event, I was motivated, I was energized, I learned so much. And then it felt a bit flat, to be honest. And as we discussed earlier, the point is collaboration, how to take, I feel quite humbled. I'm in an event with so many experts. I describe myself as being a Tigger. I think somebody else described themselves as being a Tigger. Tiggers are good. So I've got a passion, I've got energy. I believe I can get results, but I also need to know which direction to bounce and where to head in. And I'd really like, if this network for me feels great, if we can meet by teams, or if we can set up channels, we set up themes. For me, this sounds perfect because, you know, Sony designs great products, but we'd like to get the experiences of all the other members within TechShare. I think it's a huge community. And while we're all companies who want to satisfy our customers and make profits, actually, we want to do what's good for society as well. So I think what I'm listening to here from all these advocates is wonderful. And it's something that we'd really support. So I think this really, from my perspective, it ends the conference on a positive note, because I know before I stand here or talk to you next year for my third TechShare, I know that I've done something in the last 12 months where I've tried to contribute to the TechShare society. So from my perspective, this is wonderful.
Thank you, David. And the Tigger thing, yeah, we have King of the Tiggers here as well, Gareth. So
yeah, I do a presentation called "The Wonderful Thing About Tiggers."
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah,
and and I was also very, very pleased to find out, David, that you're not my big brother, because I thought, what the hell is he doing here?
So I'm going to close a couple. It's 12 minutes to go. We need to start winding up. We need 5 minutes before we join the 5 o'clock session. So I think there's a couple of things I want to mention not been picked up so far. I can see Lucy in the conversation as well, and I know the IAAP had a session earlier. I just have a question to you, Charlie, rather than opening it up. Do you have a sense that there is a network out there that will complement the things that we're doing? Is some of it that we need a bit of signposting to something that already exists, that we need to collaborate in a particular space, or is there really just a completely open space here that nobody is filling?
For me, we did a bit of a look round, and there's some smaller kind of collaborating groups, but I think having something where we've got I'm not saying a ton of structure, but some structure, a way of communicating, a way of continuing this excitement. Like David said before, like you come to these, these sessions and you have conferences or events that you join, and the buzz and the conversation, you get excited and you think there's all new ideas, and you think, I want to continue that. And I think for me, that's what I want to do with this network. I want there to be a buzz. I want us to continue feeling the way that we do, after 3 days of TechShare Pro. And so I've looked around to try and find that kind of network. I don't know whether it's just difficult to find. It doesn't seem like there's a lot out there. If there is one, give us a shout and join us, or even give me a bit of a heads up of how you collaborate with each other. I'm more than happy to sit and learn. But I think it's such an open space, and there's a lot of people that are so enthusiastic about it, that I think we are starting something reasonably new because of the kind of the wave of people that wanted to be involved. I think it's just about keeping that momentum up. Like we talked about this morning with Hector, it's about changing a mindset and keeping that momentum and carrying on, and having other people that are around you that can support you in that journey as well.
Thank you. So I think it's obvious that somebody's got to do something, and I want them to do it now.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure what it is just yet, but it's quite clear that we all want it. A couple of extra questions then. I think I know the answer to this, but I just wonder, is there any geographical constraint on anything we're doing? I mean, is there any reason why there should be that you can think of?
Not really. We talked about that being Gareth as well. So because we've got people from pretty much everywhere, we'll be doing, when we do webinars and we all have a catch up, which might be one in the morning and one in the evening, just to make sure that everybody can join. You can join from anywhere. And I think that is the bonus of this network. We're so flexible, and there's going to be so many other people that will be in your time zone as well, that totally works. It means that it's accessible for everybody. We can be completely inclusive. I think having a platform where we can all discuss things, and maybe a folder for resources, and again, monthly themes, that's something that me and Gareth discussed as well. Like if there's a thing that's been coming up in our network that seems to be a regular problem, that could be something that we bring to what we're talking about here. I think there's not going to be a lot of constraint. We will figure that out as things go. So for example, the next steps are me going around and speaking to every single organization, getting an idea of what they want and what we can provide, having a bit of a structure, and then having our first webinar at the beginning of the year and introducing ourselves and going, this is kind of what it looks like, and let's just see what happens over the next 6 months, or this is the aim, to have a bit of a conference by the end of the year where we can all come together of what we've learned. There are goals that we've got, and there are things that we as an ideal, but somebody might have something in a conversation over the next couple of weeks to go, isn't this a great idea? And we think, yeah, let's go in that direction. That totally works. And it's about the fact that we can all bring that together and all have these ideas and develop it ourselves. It means that it serves a purpose for everybody, rather than us going, this is what it looks like, and if you fit into that category, then that works.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, certainly next steps in terms of anything you want to do to connect up with AbilityNet, TechShare Pro, and all the stuff we've got. Clearly I'm keen to look ahead and make TechShare Pro a part of what we can try and do together next year. So there's an opportunity there, I think, for us to look at our agenda and the value we can bring to the network. But there are other networks out there as well. I think that's part of the trick is going to be connecting in, isn't it? And back to Andy's point about piggybacking and not reinventing the wheel and all that sort of stuff. Great. Lots of really positive conversations in the chat. About this being a great interactive session. I honestly, it's been fantastic hearing everybody pitch in. Charlie and Gareth, I know it's not just you that's going to do it, but thank you so much for taking us sort of a lead in this over the last few months since I first heard about it. Clearly, there's a snowball rolling here, and we're all looking forward to seeing what happens next. So thank you so much for all that you're doing now, and we'll definitely see you on the next massive webinar. I'm gonna leave now. We're all due over in the main stage at 5, so I'll see you all over there. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, thank you, everyone.